Okay, we're back. And this time we're gonna, this is the last of 3 videos. We're doing problem set 6, and we're doing the 3rd problem, the chapter 11 problem. And what do we got to do here now?
Problem 3. The bond_funds.xls file contains information regarding 8 variables from a sample of 184 bond mutual funds.
Okay, let's look at that. Okay, here we are. And so we've got bond funds, and we've got a fund number, a type, assets, fees or no fees, expense ratio, 2009 return, 3-year return, 5-year return, and risk. That's a lot of columns.
The 3 columns that are relevant for this problem are: first, the type column, which specifies the type of bond, either intermediate government or short-term corporate. The fees column indicates whether or not there are sales charges associated with the bond. Third, the risk column specifies a risk category for the bond, either below average, average, or above average.
Okay, good. Thanks. Okay, so I got that. What do we need to do here? It looks like we're going to construct 3 contingency tables. And for the first one, it's going to be fees as the row, type as the column. There's going to be there's 2 fees and 2 types. So that will be a 2 by 2. For the second one here, it looks like we're going to do fees as the row and risk is the column, as the columns. And there's 3 risks, so below, average, and above. So that's going to be a 2 by 3. And these are all chi-squares, as you probably guessed. These are all proportions. And the third one is risk as the row. There's 3 rows, or 3 risks, so that's 3 rows. And type is the column. There are 2 columns. So we're going to do these 3 different kinds of chi-squares here. So let's see what we're going to do first.
Question A. Construct a contingency table using fees as the row variable and type as the column variable.
Okay, so let's do that. Now there's a couple ways we can do that. Let's do it the easy way but tough to remember way. That's what I call it, because we use pivot tables, and pivot tables are a way of unstacking and creating a contingency table based on what you specify. So to make a pivot table, you'll see what that looks like. Click on Insert, Pivot Table, and here it says select the data you want to analyze. Well, you can just select the whole dang thing. Select the whole thing from fund number all the way to above average, so that we got it all there. And we can put this, we could put the pivot table on the same worksheet. Let's do that. Let's put it like I'm going to click on existing worksheet, and then I'm going to click down here on location, and I think I'm going to put that pivot table right here, and click OK. There's our pivot table. Nice pivot table. Okay, now what do we do with this pivot table? We can actually use this pivot table to generate all. I'm going to move it down a little bit. I'm going to put the pivot table. That's selected. I'm going to put the pivot table existing worksheet. I'm going to put it down farther, like right here. Okay, now we got the whole thing. So what we do now is we just select the row and the columns that we're going to use. The first one we're going to use is going to be fees and type. So I click fees and type, and I look down here and notice they appear down here, but they're like in the wrong place. So fees is rows and type is columns, so I'm going to move type right up here. And so there, that's right. Fees is here in columns. Okay, that's right. And then I got to put, then I want to say what I want to sum up here, and it doesn't matter. I can either grab type or fees. Just grab one of them. I'm going to grab type, why not? And just click and drag that down into here and let go. And here is our contingency table, just like that. So there are 53 bonds that are of the intermediate government type with no fees. And there are, for example, 20 bonds that are of the short-term corporate type. And yes, there are fees. So now that we've done that contingency table, what's next? Okay, for A, at the 0.05 level of significance, is there evidence of a difference between... Oh, let me just...
Question B. For A, at the 0.05 level of significance, is there evidence of a difference between intermediate government and short-term corporate bond mutual funds on whether there is a fee? What?
All right. So I'm going to do a chi-square now. So chi-square. I'm going to do add-ins, PHStat. This is a 2-sample test. Summarize data. I'm going to do this one, chi-square, right here, chi-square. And this thing pops up. And I'm just going to put a title here of fees hyphen type. And click OK. And this thing pops up. And it's a template. I'm going to move this out of the way. And I just need to fill in this stuff over here. And I can do that very easily. I can just do copy paste. Copy paste. I just need to paste the values. Okay, there we go. So that data is in there, and actually I'm double clicking up here, and actually so our data is in here. It's all in here, but I want to finish labeling these things. So make sure I don't make a mistake. I'm just going to copy this yes no. I'll copy no yes because I get those mixed up. Right here, paste, and this is fees, and this is type. And what we see here is, and so our hypothesis is that there is no difference in, there's no difference in there's no difference in whether the intermediate government, but the type of bond has anything to do with the fee. Okay, and so that's what we're looking at. We're looking at if there is a significant difference between the type of bond depending on the fee. So if we look at the expected frequencies, which we calculate, you recall. I think we went over this a week or so ago, where we calculate the expected frequencies by taking, this times this over this is the expected frequency of intermediate government, which is this value. And so, and that's how you calculate all these. And so, this table over here displays what the difference is between what was observed and what was expected, and that's quite a large amount. And this is the these values squared divided by the expected, and these are the numbers that contribute to calculating the chi-square statistic, as you know. See, this sums all those up. And so we look down here to decide whether we can reject the null hypothesis, and that is that there is no difference. And we see that the chi-square statistic that we calculated is much higher than the critical value, and so yeah, we're going to reject that. We also notice the p-value is much smaller than 0.05, And sure enough, what's nice is our PHStat tells us the conclusion here, and we do reject the null hypothesis. Notice also that the frequency assumption, which is that each of these expected frequencies is 5 or greater. That's what this thing tests. Make sure all 4 of these are 5 or greater, and they certainly are. So if just one of them is not, then it's violated. In this case, it's that none of them is less than 5, so is met, is displayed right here. Okay, so that takes care of this question. There is evidence. The answer is there is evidence. There is a difference between intermediate government and short-term corporate bonds on whether or not there's a fee. Okay, what's next?
Question C. Construct a contingency table, using fees as the row variable and risk as the column variable.
Okay, let's do that. I'm going to go back here, and I can use the same pivot table or a different pivot table. I guess I'll use a different pivot table. Go insert pivot table, and the range is going to be the same range. And I'm going to put it in the existing worksheet. Yeah, that's a good place for it. Okay, and so now I got this second pivot table here. I'm going to put it down a little bit. Select the range again. Existing worksheet. Yeah, okay. Okay, so here's my second pivot table, and this time I'm going to do fees as the row and risk as the column. So let me do fees as rows, and risk, put that over here in column. And then to fill in something, I just got to grab one of these and put it down in values, and it counts them up. And so that's our pivot table. That's our and our contingency table. And now we can do chi-square. So let's do add-ins, PHStat, multiple. Okay, now we're going to do multiple sample. Remember before we did two sample. Now we're going to do multiple sample chi-square, and this thing pops up, and the level of significance is 0.05. The number of rows is 2, and the number of columns is 3. And this I'm going to call fees and risk. And I'm going to do this Marascuilo procedure. Click. And this thing pops up. Here we are. And now I just got to fill in these variables, these cells here. So I'm going to go back to my data, and I'm going to copy. Oops, I don't want to do that. Copy. Click. Paste values. And so that's there now. And I want to put these in here, so so I don't get mixed up. Copy, paste, values, fees, and risk. And we see here that we would not reject the null hypothesis because when we add up all these are the differences between observed and expected. These are the expecteds, and we take the difference, square it, and divide it by the expected down here, add all these up, and we get a chi-square statistic of that, and that is not bigger than the critical value. We can actually see where like for example, this critical value comes from. If we go back to the textbook and we go to page 525, we get critical values of chi-square, and we are looking at the cumulative, the upper tail area of alpha of 0.05, so it's this column, and the degrees of freedom is this number here, 2, so we can go down 0.5 until we get to 2, and that would be right here, 5.991, and we look over here, and that's exactly what was put here, 5.991. And so we see that the chi-square that we calculate is smaller than this, so we do not reject. The p-value is bigger than this, so we do not reject. The frequency assumption is met. Beyond a 2,2, we only need one expected frequency. We only need at least one in here. Just let me get rid of that. And so it does meet that, because each one of these is at least one. Okay, so that is this second question C here. Now, what do we need to do for question D?
Question D. For C, at the 0.05 level of significance, is there evidence of a difference between below average, average, and above average risk bond mutual funds on whether there is a fee?
Yeah. Yes, we just answered that. And it is, I just want to point out here, if we would have found a difference, if we would have rejected, then we can look at the Marascuilo data here, and we can see, and it provides the same kind of information as the Tukey-Kramer does in an analysis of variance. Of course, we didn't see anything significant because we didn't even reject. Anyway, so let's go to the third one here, the E.
Question E. Construct a contingency table using risk as the row variable and type as the column variable.
All right, do that real quick here. Let's go back to data. Now we're going to create a Tukey. Now, tell you what. There's another way we can create a contingency table, and I'd like to show you that way. Okay. So I'm just going to click here, and I'm going to make a new one using formulas, and we're going to have risk here, and risk is going to be above average, average, and below average, and we have fees. What is it? Type. We've got type, and that is precisely intermediate government and short-term corporate. And so let's make these bigger. And so we've got, we need to create this contingency table. We don't need to total these up or anything. And so to do this, we can use the count if. Now, just to make it easier, I'm going to actually name these columns because I don't fooling around with the dollar signs and so on. It's just to make it more clear. I'm going to name these columns. And so I'm going to name the risk column, and I'm going to name the type column. This is the type column. So to name the column, I select the column. I select the range, and I'm going to name the range. Click right up here, and I'm going to name it type. I'm going to name it capital TYPE. Okay, so that, enter. Okay, now that range is named type. And this one here, I'm going to name this one risk. Click R-I-S-K, capital. Enter. Okay, now I got these two columns, risk and type. Okay, I'm going to use the COUNTIF statement, the COUNTIF function. So I'm counting COUNTIFs, actually, a criteria range, and I can use the named ranges if the risk is equal to this value and the type is equal to this value, okay, as it goes down through the range, then count it up. And we got 29 of those. 29 of those where the type is intermediate government and the risk is above average. Now, I'd like to be able to drag this formula down and to the next two rows here, and then drag it across to the next column here. And so I need to put my dollar signs in correctly. K, I want, when I drag it down, I want the column to be able to change, but when I drag it across, I don't want the row to change. And for the L, when I drag it across, I want L to change, but when I drag it down, I don't want the type to change, so I don't want the 20 to change. So I'm going to put the dollar sign there. Okay, so now I'll be able to just drag this over there and drag these two down here, and I've got my contingency table for risk and type. Okay, that's all I need. So I don't need any totals or anything, so let's go ahead and do add-ins, PHStat, multiple sample tests, chi-square, and this thing pops up, and my level of significance is 0.05, and my number of rows is 3, and my number of columns is 2, and I'm going to put risk type. Click OK, and this thing pops up. Let me move this over, and I can just paste the values in. In fact, this time I think I can probably just copy this whole thing and go over here and just do paste values. And this is type. So I've got my columns here, and these are all filled in. Are these independent? Is type and risk independent? That's the hypothesis. The null hypothesis is that they are independent, and if we reject that, then that means that they're not independent. And look here, we do not reject. We are critical value, when you add up all the contribution to the chi-square test statistic, it doesn't add up to anything. Critical value is much higher, and we could look that up with the degrees of freedom if we wanted to. But anyway, so we don't reject there. The p-value is way greater than this, so we don't reject for that reason. The expected frequency assumption is met. And so let's go back here. And what is the last question here?
Question F. 4. E. At the 0.05 level of significance, is there evidence of a relationship between the type of bond mutual fund and its perceived risk? What?
And no, there is not. There's no evidence, because we did not reject. Now, when you are doing this yourself, you don't need to do it this third way. You can do all three of them this way. it's easier. But keep in mind that there's always more than one way of doing something, and so you can use whichever one you prefer. Thanks for watching.